Hello, today is Thursday, January 5th, 2023. Welcome to the League of Women Voters annual Legislature send-off meeting. My name is Carlene Shaw, and I'm president of the League of Women Voters of Jefferson County, West Virginia. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. As part of our civic mission, we advocate for methods to increase voter turnout, support legislation to modernize election methods, reduce taxpayer costs, reduce administrative burden, and oppose restrictions on voter registration or voting. We hold to these principles regardless of the outcome of any election because the right to vote and equal access to the ballot are pillars of our democracy and of the League. We are recording this legislators forum, so please mute yourself now to make sure no extra sounds interfere with what our guests are saying. You are encouraged to add to the questions that we've already collected by typing questions into the chat. We will try to get to all questions, but if we run out of time, we'll pass the questions to our guests so that they can respond to them. Thank you all for joining what I know will be a very informative program. And thanks to all the League members who helped to pull this program together. In particular, thanks to Dixie Dunn for all the prep work, Susan Pipes for our tech support and for moderating tonight since Dixie can't, and Addison Reese for backing up Susan on tech support. We invited all of the legislators from Jefferson and Berkeley County and are extremely pleased to welcome the following delegates who are able to be with us tonight. Okay, one who said who was coming is not here yet. We have Paul Espinosa of District 98, who has been named Speaker pro tempore of the House, I understand. And Wayne Clark of District 99, who is Vice Chair of the Economic Development and Tourism Committee. And I need to warn all of you that Delegate Espinosa will have to leave at 10:30. So please be understanding as he takes care of other commitments. All of their positions, the positions they've been named to, are very important to those of us in the Eastern Panhandle. And we wish them patience and clear thoughts as they carry out their duties as our delegates. And please welcome our moderator for tonight, Susan Pipes, who will start with the questions submitted by League members, giving you time to submit additional questions in the chat. Susan?
Hi, my name is Susan Pipes, and I will be your moderator tonight. And I will start with the very first question that will be for both of our delegates, Mr. Espinosa and Delegate Clark. This is regarding our judicial redistricting meeting in 2023. By West Virginia state law, new judicial redistricting can only be done the year after a census, which will be done the year after it. My apologies. The judicial redistricting can only be done the year after a census, which will be in 2023. When judges are overscheduled, the defendants are left sitting in jail waiting for trial, and the counties must pay for their stay. The judges, clerks, and court reporters are all state employees, and we all know that without locality pay, that means they are underpaid in Jefferson County and don't get a living wage. But this is a separate issue for another discussion. Jefferson County has a growing population, and right now Jefferson County has 1.5 circuit court judges, serving a growing population of 57,701 constituents, the most per judge in the entire state. Meanwhile, McDowell County has 2 judges serving a shrinking population of 19,111. Given this huge disparity, do you support judicial redistricting during this session? And using current population data, do you allocate more judges to growing areas? Delegate Espinosa, if you would take this question first.
Well, certainly. And first, just would like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting tonight's forum. Always appreciate the opportunity to participate in your forums and discuss the upcoming legislative session and to also hear your perspective through your questions on topics of interest. And Susan, thank you for moderating this evening, for pinch hitting this evening. I certainly do support the redistricting process. Certainly believe that based on not only population but also caseload, that areas such as Jefferson County certainly should be considered for additional circuits, or circuit judges, as well as magistrates. Last session certainly was pleased to work very closely with Delegate Hardy, who unfortunately I see is not able to attend here this evening, but he worked very, very hard on trying to address a similar shortage of magistrate judges, and was able to secure one additional magistrate for Berkeley County. But part of that commitment, in basically agreeing to the one additional magistrate, was that as part of the circuit court redistricting, that it's certainly our expectation that the magistrate courts are going to be examined as well. And so I do believe it's very important to look at the metrics. I certainly recognize that there are other factors such as coverage. Even in some of the sparsely populated areas of the state, certainly you do have to have sufficient coverage. If one judge is not available, you want to have other judges and other magistrates in order to ensure that someone can be arraigned in an expeditious manner. But I think under any fair apportionment, certainly growing areas like the Eastern Panhandle, I do believe should receive some additional representation through our courts. So absolutely will support that, and look forward to working with not only our House Judiciary Chair, Moore Capito, but also Senator Charlie Trump, who chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee, who I absolutely believe shares our commitment to trying to make sure that we do receive a fair apportionment of not only circuit judges, but magistrates.
Thank you, Delegate Espinosa. Delegate Clark.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add from what Delegate Espinosa has already said is that your example may be a little off. We don't know, because the other part that also goes into play on how many is caseload. So you could have I think you used McDowell County as your example. You could have a much higher caseload than population, and so that does offer it. Again, John Hardy has been a champion on this for several years. I do plan on voting for and supporting the bill, but everything that's already been said, I don't think I could add anything more.
Along with this, do you see any reason why Berkeley County voters should elect Jefferson County judges, or why Jefferson County voters should elect Berkeley County voters? Judges in the 23rd Judicial Circuit have not rotated between the counties in over 21 years. Delegate Clark, if you would like to take this first.
Well, I guess the answer to that question would be is if the circuit judges are rotating between the two counties, then I would say that both counties would be voting for the circuit judges, just like we do on our Senate representatives, Jefferson County representative and a Berkeley County representative. But if they're not doing a rotation, then I would say Jefferson County votes for Jefferson County. But again, I'm sure we're going to put a good team together that's going to vet this bill and this process all the way through both judiciary committees to come up with the best one that's going to work for not only the Eastern Panhandle but the entire state.
Delegate Espinosa.
Well, Susan, I think the underlying question is, should Jefferson County be its own circuit? And I know that's been something that has been looked at previously. My predecessor, or one of my previous colleagues, I believe Delegate Skinner, as I recall, I believe he had offered an amendment at one point to make Jefferson County its own circuit. at least at that time, I know there was some pushback from the Judicial Reapportionment Committee. I'm probably getting the name of that committee. There's an advisory committee made up of judges across the state that I think pushed back on that. I guess one of the things that would have to be looked at is, again, with coverage. How do you fill in? If a judge has a conflict or is otherwise not available to hear cases. I think one of the rationales for having a Eastern Panhandle circuit, if you will, is so that there can be, under certain circumstances, opportunities for folks to move back and forth, if they're conflicted out of a case and so forth. So it's certainly something that I'm open to, but I do think that it should be guided by the metrics, and certainly look forward to seeing the recommendation of that advisory panel comprised of folks in the judiciary to see what their recommendation is.
Thank you. We're going to be moving on to some voting issues. This will be for both of you. Do you expect the voter fraud, voter suppression legislation to be reintroduced this session? We understand that it was shelved or tabled at the very last minute of the last session due to some sort of legislative technicality. From what I have learned, voter fraud is not a real issue. And when I say this is from someone that submitted this question. The real issue is getting people to vote at all. In fact, West Virginia was considered a leader in election security. And would you like to comment on what would you all do to make sure that we get people out to vote?
Well, I'll start here. Obviously, we know the last two election cycles, West Virginia has had one of the highest rated election processes, and that's MAC all the way through, doing a great job with that process. Asking in regards to fraud. I don't have a lot of information on that. I know there's some talk of some bills that are coming through in regards to the proving of residency for the candidates, things like that. But where I don't see voter suppression or fraud here in the state of West Virginia. The bottom line is we just got to get more people out to vote. Have them come out and vote and make their voices heard.
So, in other words, you do not believe that the voter fraud, voter suppression legislation will be reintroduced this session?
Well, keep in mind that anybody can introduce any bill they want. I mean, I could go into my office tomorrow and write a bill that no one can use a laptop in public and introduce the bill. As whether or not that bill makes it to the floor, that's completely up to the committee that it's assigned to.
Delegate Espinosa?
Sure. Well, I think Delegate Clark makes an excellent point. Any legislator can introduce a piece of legislation, and while certainly the individual who's submitted this question believes that a particular piece of legislation that they were referring to represents voter suppression, I would say that just because legislation is aimed at reforming our election laws, our election procedures, I don't necessarily believe means that that's a voter suppression. I know that certainly the legislation that was enacted in Georgia, I think that's been looked at, very critically by some individuals as being voter suppression. But yet, if you look at that law, it's provides greater voting opportunities than a lot of other areas. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was compared to either New York or one of the largely Democratic controlled states in the Northeast, and actually provides greater flexibility. So I think sometimes legislation is portrayed as being legislation that would suppress. But I think bottom line, we want to make sure that our elections are as fair as possible. And again, I agree with Delegate Clark that Secretary of State Mac Warner, I think, has done an excellent job. He and his staff and our county clerks have done an excellent job of administrating our elections. I would finally say, Susan, that I've actually introduced several pieces of legislation at the request of Secretary of State Warner. For example, most folks, I think, on this Zoom call this evening would recall that there was some impropriety with one of the recent Harpers Ferry elections, where actually some folks were denied, or at least there seemed to be an effort, or at least in effect, there was denial of folks from having their votes counted. There was legislation that was recommended by the Secretary of State's office in order to address that and help prevent that from occurring in the future. So I'm always looking for recommendations by our election officials, legislation that they believe will make our elections fair and less prone to improprieties. And so I would fully anticipate that there will be legislation, but I can't really say what that will comprise at this point.
Thank you. The next question that was submitted: with about 50%, around 50% of the eligible population staying at home on election day, recent election, actual participation in democracy is a real concern. Where do you stand on this issue, and what ideas do you have on how to get out the vote? Delegate Espinosa, if you would like to take this first.
Well, certainly making myself available for forums like this evening, I think, is a big part of that. I think both Delegate Clark and I think it's fair to say each of our Eastern Panhandle members of our Eastern Panhandle delegation, I think, are very, very accessible to the public. The Chamber of Commerce, of course, hosts similar forums to the League as far as both pre and post sessions. So that folks could not only hear some of the topics of legislation that we anticipate will be introduced, and again would be happy to share my perspective on that if you'd like. And then most importantly, or I think just as importantly, being able to share at the end of the session what legislation was enacted and where we stood on that legislation, so that folks can hold us accountable, because I fully anticipate or expect that should be held accountable. So I think that's a big part of it. Even during the session, I try to make myself available. Certainly now that it's post-COVID, certainly welcome folks to visit the legislative process in Charleston. And I suspect several folks that are on this call have been to Charleston, and always, particularly if folks will let us know that they're going to be traveling to Charleston, we'll certainly make every effort to spend some time with folks. And through technology such as we're using this evening, I've also participated in group discussions with college students. There's several students in particular at Shepherd University that I've actually conversed with over the last several years. They've tried to educate me on some policy that they would like to see enacted, and I try to share with them my perspective. So I think all those things are important in order to make folks feel that their vote counts, and that there is transparency in government, and that we do value input from those folks who take the time to share their perspective with us.
Thank you. Delegate Clark?
I mean, yeah, I would love to see more people vote. I mean, I take voting as my constitutional right, and I do not think I've missed a vote. And if it's been a vote, it's been a small municipality vote. Maybe, a few years ago when we had some issues, with some family members. But I don't miss votes, and I wish other people had that same mentality. I know I was out door knocking during the campaign process and trying to get people to come out and vote. I have neighbors that one didn't know where to vote. I was glad to tell them where to vote, but they chose not to vote. And I that's their choice. I mean, I wish more people came out to vote. It makes it easy for us to know that, of our 18,000 people that we represent, is when you have, 60 or 70% of them show up to vote and vote you in, then you understand that you've reached your audience.
Yes, thank you. One more on voting. In 2020, barriers to absentee voting were lowered because of COVID. Overall turnout rose. All that, according to Secretary of State, without harm to election security. I would like to state that West Virginia has been considered a leader in our election, not just in, security-wise, but also in electronic security. And also, Mac Warner did say that West Virginia voters had absolutely no reason to be concerned about interference or manipulation of data, simply because of how we handle our elections. And we could be really proud, just as Delegate Espinosa has pointed out, of how West Virginia handles elections. So when absentee restrictions were reinstated in 2022, absentee voting and turnout plummeted. Our current absentee eligibility rules are exceedingly complex. The application process is cumbersome, and absentee voting is not promoted. A bill to simplify absentee voting for voters and county clerks was introduced in 2022 legislature and will be again in 2023. Will you support such legislation? Delegate Clark?
I will gladly read over it and see what all is being proposed in the bill, to make a decision on whether or not I will support or not support the bill when it hits the floor. I do not think that a bill of that will hit any of my committees that I sit on. So it would have to come to the floor before I have an opportunity to make a decision whether or not I'm going to vote yes or no on the bill. But again, like I said a little earlier, anybody can write any bill they want. So understanding what is in the bill will be needed before I can make a decision on what I can vote or not vote for.
Delegate Espinosa?
Well, I think Delegate Clark has made some very good points. It's very difficult to comment specifically on a idea or a proposal when you don't actually see these specifics. For example, if a piece of legislation contained provisions that will allow for unmonitored drop boxes, for example, that might lend themselves to ballot harvesting, which is not permitted in West Virginia, for example, that's certainly something that I wouldn't support. So without really knowing the specifics of the legislation, very difficult to know. But I certainly would be happy to take a look at it. Like Delegate Clark, I do not serve on our House Judiciary Committee, which would more than likely be the committee where that type of legislation would likely first be considered. But again, would be happy to take a look at it. I think Secretary of State Warner has, I agree with his belief that in-person voting really is the gold standard. If you look at the most secure method of voting, that is that in-person voting on election day. I do believe that we should provide opportunities for folks to vote in advance and to do absentee. While some folks may believe that our absentee ballot request process is difficult, I've actually used it myself. There's been a couple of primaries when I've actually been out of town for business and have used the online portal in order to request a ballot. It was very, very simple to get my ballot. I completed it, sent it in, no issues whatsoever. I know that our children have all used, not all, but 2 out of our 3 grown children now used absentee ballots when they were away at college. Again, a very simple process. So I do believe that there should be opportunities for absentee voting, but I like the idea of, to the greatest extent possible, folks voting in person. And, you know, your previous question that dealt with confidence in the election system, I really have to question how much when we see elections that don't get decided for days or in some cases weeks because ballots are continuing to be processed. I'm not sure how well that really generates confidence and enthusiasm in our elections when, contrary to what we've seen in the past, you don't necessarily have a determined winner on election night. I can certainly see if, you know, a race is very, very close. Certainly, we've seen cases here in West Virginia where it may take a little time in order to determine those races. But I think for ballots to continue to be processed days and weeks after election, I don't think that really lends itself to confidence and enthusiasm in our election system.
Thank you. I'm going to try to address at least one, maybe two regarding West Virginia families before I know Delegate Espinosa, you need to leave, because I would like to hopefully let you just make a closing statement about what issues you would see for the next session before you leave. Would you please let us know how you stand on the issue of abolishing the income tax in West Virginia for senior citizens? Delegate Espinosa, if you would like to take this first. Sure.
Well, I was pleased to actually co-sponsor the legislation that did actually eliminate the tax on the personal income tax on Social Security with there was a means test there. And I further support and will certainly co-sponsor, if at all possible, legislation that would finish the job on that legislation, lift the means test altogether so that all personal income tax on Social Security benefits can be eliminated. I anticipate that legislation will be taken up this session and will happily co-sponsor, and if not co-sponsor, will certainly support that legislation.
Delegate Clark.
My favorite word when I talk after Paul, ditto. I am dead on, same thing. Paul knows we have.
Okay. I really would, if possible, I'd like to ask one more question before we bid Delegate Espinosa goodbye. What legislation would you support that would improve the lives of West Virginians, especially our children, who are our most vulnerable population, who are living in poverty? Delegate Espinosa.
Sure. Well, again, I'll try to be as concise as possible. Obviously, that's a pretty expansive question, but yes. Certainly there's been a lot of discussion about our Department of Human Resources, Health and Human Resources. I think by any fair assessment, our Department of Health and Human Resources is failing way too many children. You look at the dearth of child protective service workers, other folks in that field. It's abysmal. And to think that a quarter of our general revenue budget and probably somewhere in excess of $7 billion is budgeted annually, including federal appropriations for DHHR, and to get the abysmal results that we are, I mean, that's just not acceptable. I fully anticipate that there's going to be legislation to restructure DHHR in an effort to try to make it more responsive to those most vulnerable among us, and certainly look forward to that legislation, and will certainly support, trying to make our DHHR more responsive. I think just on the topic of tax reform, I do believe that particularly when we are running, probably this year, our budget surplus is probably going to end up approaching $2 billion. I think in light of the fact that we are making significant investments in infrastructure, including roads and broadband, a lot of other areas that have been neglected, really for decades. In light of the fact that we are making significant investments and yet still have significant surpluses, I do think it's time to provide some meaningful tax relief to taxpayers, and fully anticipate that we will enact some meaningful tax relief so that taxpayers can keep more of their hard-earned dollars and decide what is best for their families, which certainly I think has a direct positive impact on families in West Virginia.
Delegate Espinosa, we realize that you are going to have to depart here shortly. And I know we had several other questions that we will be needing to address. And will it be all right if we will submit those to you so we can get and we can share your thoughts and answers with our members?
Absolutely. And certainly I would encourage folks to reach out to me directly. If you go to the West Virginia Legislative website, my email address is there, and particularly identify yourself, somebody from Jefferson County. Sometimes we get inundated by legislation on specific topics from all over the state, and it's very difficult to respond to everyone, but particularly those folks who make it clear that they're from Jefferson County. And if they include their address, I usually have a pretty good idea of those that are in my district. I'm always happy to respond to them, and feel free to call me as well. I do have an assistant who, if I'm on the floor and not available, they will take a message, and I will be certain to return those calls. So certainly welcome that input. I will just say that I do believe that we've covered a couple of the main issues that will likely be taken up during the session: tax reform as well as DHHR. I mentioned election reform. There's several pieces of legislation that various groups that are very interested in trying to lower the barriers to those folks that perhaps have been imprisoned and are trying to regain their voter rights. I've been in conversations with folks to consider legislation that I believe hopefully we could enact during this session, and any other reform that the Secretary of State's office and our clerks offer. And again, just will continue to try to do the very best to continue to improve our state's business climate, because again, I think one of the best things for families is to have good quality jobs with benefits, so that again they can have gainful employment and provide for their families. So again, appreciate the opportunity. As I shared with you before tonight's meeting, Susan, Speaker Hanshaw has called a leadership meeting, which is why I need to drop off now, but certainly have appreciated the opportunity to participate this evening.
Thank you for your time, Delegate Espinosa, and have a great evening.
Thank you. Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year. Delegate Clark, thank you so very much for being patient.
Sure not.
And we'll go back to a couple of questions that that I went. All right, so back to families. How involved will you be in prioritizing the money that was allocated to the state of West Virginia through the CARES Act? And what would you do with it if you were up to it? And what I would like to do as a note for our audience, CARES Act is not to be confused with previous various laws called CARE Act. The CARES Act we are discussing is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, which is a $2.2 trillion economic stimulus bill passed in law in 2020 by President Trump. What would you do with the money if it were up to you, or Delegate Clark?
Well, so I don't sit on finance, and finance is the one who takes care of the appropriations from that money. I cannot tell you exactly how much money we have not appropriated yet. I know that money does have to be appropriated and spent by 2024, or else it has to be returned. That is going to be the job of Delegate John Hardy as the vice chair, and Delegate Vernon Chris as the new chair of House Finance to determine where that money has gone. If I had a magic wand on where I would have put the money, if there was any money that went differently than I may have voted for, I don't think I've voted against any of the appropriations that we have had. It would just be something, some small things. I have a good friend who runs VOAD. VOAD is a flood restoration company that's a nonprofit down in the southern part of the state. And they've been trying to get their business, their operation into the budget for several years. It's only a couple $100,000 is their annual budget because they get a lot of money from grants and FEMA and things like that. So that I would definitely take care of my good friend Jenny on that prospect. So but again, it's a question. It's not necessarily in my expertise. I know we put some money aside for a closing fund on the economic development part of it, and that's something that has been really good for helping us land companies like Nucor, Berkshire Hathaway, the metal company up in Martinsburg, and Clorox, and Green Power, the buses. So making sure that we're using that closing fund to bring new businesses here in the state is important.
Thank you. Okay, the Department of Children's Services investigates report of abuse and neglect of children, provides services to children and families in their homes, and places children in foster care if they are unsafe in their own homes. It also finds permanent homes for children who cannot return to their own homes. There have been bills in the West Virginia legislature addressing various members' ideas about children and families, but none addressing the serious staffing shortages and underfunding of our children's services. What do you think needs to be done to be sure that trained and professional staff and a well-managed organization are in place to serve our state's children? Are you prepared to tackle this issue in the upcoming session?
So the House delegates and the Senate are prepared to attack this issue. If you guys don't know, Senate President Craig Blair just recently sent a 7-page letter to DHHR on addressing many of these issues. Last year, we did pass a bill that would split the DHHR into 2 entities, and that ultimately got vetoed by the president by the governor after session was after we had signed it at the end of the session. So we do have a team together. That's I know the House where Delegate Amy Summers is leading that team on the DHR revitalization and or reconstruction, or because like Paul said, I mean, it's a $7 billion operation. So and we're all aware of all the issues with CPS workers, with foster care, with the grandparent rights, all the other stuff, and all that is going to be addressed at some point, and if it's this session, the 2023 session, or it's the 2024 session, one of those two, but in the 86th legislature, we're going to bring it out.
Thank you. We are going to move into some education questions. Many counties in West Virginia cannot fill teaching positions with certified teachers. How would you attract qualified teachers to West Virginia?
Now we're talking. I've served on the education committee for the last 2 years, and I'll continue to serve on the education committee for the 86th legislature. I had the luxury of going to the Southern Legislative Conference back in July at Oklahoma City, and one of the great programs that we did learn about in regards to teacher retention was an internship that that the state of Tennessee has been using, and has been very beneficial. It's a federal internship that allows those who are coming out of high school who say, I want to be a teacher, and they can start in the classroom right after high school doing student teaching, but at the same time they're going to school through this program to get their degree while they're working, while they're substitute teaching. Obviously they're not going to be handed over their own classroom until they've actually gone through all of their certification. But the teacher shortage is a nationwide issue. One of the biggest things that we have to understand is when most of us that are on this call right now grew up, our teacher was kind of part of the family. I'm sure everybody that's on this call can remember one of their elementary school teachers' names that impacted them the most. But it was more of a, it wasn't, there was no issues when the parents called. I mean, I remember when I was in middle school and elementary school, parent teacher organization meetings were held in the auditorium because there was so many parents showing up. Now there's no parents to show up. We have to get our parents involved in the education process as well. So that these teachers are respected more. Obviously, looking here in the state of West Virginia, locality pay is something that's going to be important. Whatever kind of retention we can do is in regards to, last year we had roughly 2,100 open jobs in the state of West Virginia, and we had like 400 kids graduate in state schools with an education degree. So that doesn't even satisfy the need. So, we have to get more people out of high school going into education. I hope that answers.
Thank you. Along those lines, many West Virginian families watch their children complete their education here and move out of state to find work. We found that numbers in 2021 showed West Virginia as the only state to lose population over the last 70 years. What measures would you support to provide more opportunities for those who want to stay in West Virginia or try to keep them in West Virginia?
So over the last few years, the legislature has been proactive on this process, and we've actually introduced bills. One that's really we have a nursing bill, and that is for nurses that go through a 2-year nursing certification process, and once they're out, we give them up to $10,000 towards their nursing certification process when they're out. If they go into a distressed area, rural areas, that kind of stuff. Basically, any area in the state of West Virginia is distressed except for the Eastern Panhandle. But so they would go and we actually pay, they get that $10,000 off their tuition for each year that they're there, and for each year that they receive that money, they have to work 2 years in the state. And our hope is that they'll then make roots. But overall, I mean, the overall pay that we're up against in all of our border counties is something that does make an impact on whether or not we keep our students at graduating college here at home. So I do know there's bills that are likely to be introduced that are in the same realm as the nursing bill that would keep our teachers, our other our behavioral health folks, our CPS workers are in the state by using ways of the same thing. For every year that they receive grant money from the state, they would then turn around and work 2 years here in the state.
Wouldn't raising the minimum wage, wouldn't that be a good start to help those stay in our state?
All right, now you're talking about something that I'm way deep in. As you all know, I do own Locust Hill Golf Course, and one of the things that's important to us is our ability to have seasonal workers, because we are a seasonal type business. Raising the minimum wage is not going to keep people in the state. Raising the minimum wage is only all that's going to do is make it a little more difficult for businesses to function. If you raise the minimum wage from $8.75 to $15 an hour, I'll give you an example. Okay, you're going to take my payroll at the golf course from 240,000 to well over 400,000 by doing that. Now, what's that going to do? I'm going to have to cut half of my staff from working, and my staff is going to have to do twice the jobs, or I'm going to have to pass it on to you all and raise my rates by double. So instead of $48 to play golf during the week, it's going to be $90 a week during the week. So at some point, I have to make a decision on how, as a business owner, do I absorb that cost? So I don't think raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour is going to do anything. In fact, if you look at the last, say, 13 months, workforce participation is at one of its all-time low for the state of West Virginia, even though we have the lowest unemployment rate in the entire country. Right after COVID, we had an influx of minimum wage jobs being offered, to the point where Chick-fil-A was offering $15 an hour for kids to sit behind the counter and take your order. All right. Well, why didn't that create a job force that's full? It didn't, because it all it's done is pushed, costs back onto the consumer. So raising the minimum wage is not necessarily the fix to put people back to work.
Thank you. We're going to move on to just some other questions. This is regarding free speech and First Amendment. If you would just like to state your opinion regarding the recent firing of the 3 West Virginia reporters, 1 with West Virginia Public Broadcasting and 2 from the Gazette-Mail.
I don't know. I know they were fired. I've read the article. I don't know any of the other details in regards to what was done or said on the in the investigative process. We overall, here's an interesting scenario. So everybody believes we can say whatever we want whenever we want, unless we're direct detriment to others, like screaming fire in a movie theater, as an example. Okay. All right. But I can assure you that every person that's on this call at some point has had someone who has said something on a social media site that has maybe caused anger in yourself, or maybe they've said something about a post that you've made, and it's called anger on their end. So when you're talking about controlling people's ability to speak, you sometimes get into the weeds of, all right, am I really trying to control what they're saying, or am I trying to control the topic they're talking about? And that's when you get into censorship. So, people have the right to say what they want, without harm to someone else.
Thank you. I would just like to ask the people that are here, if you do have any questions for Delegate Clark, please type it into our chat and I will pass it on. I only have 2 more questions, and if not, we will ask Delegate Clark to just do some closing statement and talk about if he has any issues that he would like to discuss that he may see for the next session. Delegate Clark, this one is regarding separation of government and state. Government and religion. Recently, Representative Jamie Raskin had talked about that members of Congress swear to uphold the Constitution and not the Bible. And do you believe in the separation of government and church?
Okay, so are you asking if I believe in constitutional amendment, separation of church and state? Yeah. I mean, I have the right, as long as well as you, I have the right to my belief in my deity that I support as well as you, and whether or not I'm one that evangelizes my deity or not, that is up to the individual process. Do I believe that we pray before every legislative day? The first thing we do is pray, and then we say the Pledge of Allegiance before every House floor session. And do you have to pray when it? No, you can. You don't have to listen. You can bow your head and pray in your own way or say in your own. So separation of that is what our forefathers put in front of us and said, you have your deity, I have mine. You treat your religion the way you want, I'll treat mine the way I want, regardless of what the religion is.
Thank you. And the last question, which is still a hot topic and still on a lot of constituents' mind. We would like to know, what is your position on HB 302?
Well, you're going to have to give me more than just throw me out at House Bill 302. Now 302, that would be, that would be something that was thrown out during during the interim session, because everything during session is in the thousands, like 1001, 1002. What is House Bill 302?
Regarding abortion, do you believe there should be any exceptions as you're moving through legislation and putting abortion regarding? Do you believe there should be exceptions regarding abortion in West Virginia?
So we did, state of West Virginia has one of the most strict abortion laws that's on the books nationwide. There are exceptions for rape and incest that are in the current bill. That is law. Are you asking if there are other exceptions that we need to add, or if
Okay.
there's life of mother, there is rape and incest. Those are the exceptions that do exist in the existing bill.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
All right, Delegate Clark, thank you very much for answering all the questions we have given to you, and Delegate Espinosa. At this time, do you have anything that you would like to let us know about the issues that you foresee in the next session that is coming up?
Well, nothing in regards to issues that I have in the session, but more specifically, I want to say the same thing that Paul Espinosa said, and that is, if you have questions or concerns, reach out to us. If you're coming down to the Capitol, reach out to us. At least give us the opportunity looks like someone else has a question, but give us an opportunity to introduce you, show you around. But here's something that I really want to hear from the League of Women Voters. As you know, the rock abatement process on 340 was supposed to happen this fall, but then it got postponed again to next fall. Just out of curiosity, how does that pertain, or what kind of impact would that have on many of you all? So, please put together some information and send it over to me.
Thank you very much. We did have 2 more items come up, if you don't mind taking those. The first one is, could you tell us your take on the FDA recommendation on the relaxation of accessibility and I'm sure that I'm getting ready to mispronounce this, mifepristone, which is the abortion pill.
Okay, so the legal definition of the abortion pill, which I assume what we're talking about is the morning after pill. And that is issued for individuals within the first 48 hours of reporting a rape or incest. If that's what they're asking for, I know that is still part of this process. It's part of the rape kit, but in regards to the an abortion by pill, by medication, that's illegal under our new abortion law.
Okay, I'm going to need to clarify that.
Yeah.
Because from what I understand, it is not the same as the morning after, and
Yeah.
I'm waiting on a clarification.
Yeah, it is not the same. The morning after must be taken immediately and before
Correct.
ovulation. The other one would be after someone is already pregnant, and that terminates the abortion. So, and you answered to the question. So
yeah,
that's just
great. Thank you. And the other one that came in, and I'm going to try to formulate this.
So that question is regarding the representative who was elected, and he was caught having lied about properties he owned, his religion at some point, which he says that one was a joke. But there were lots of lies involved, but he refuses to step down out of that position that he was elected to. So they're saying, how much scrutiny should a candidate be submitted to? You know, like if somebody enters into a position because they've said they have a certain education, jobs, and et cetera, you know, should they be disqualified if none of that was true in the first place? Because they've obviously, you know, misled voters.
Have to fill out financial disclosure information, and then that's open to the public. Anybody can gather that information. In fact, my report's due on Monday, which is my financial disclosure, which, you know, I have to list every source of income that I have for my household, and which includes, you know, my wife's W-2 from her job. So, you know, in regards to misleading of you know, of voters, I mean, that's something that the voters have to, you know, make that decision while they're going through the process of vetting who they're going to vote for. You know, if somebody goes in and lies about their application and does all the other stuff, but they still have a way of, you know, because remember, there's no requirements but age. There's nothing says that you have to have a PhD. Nothing says, I mean, I only have an associate arts degree from a 2-year community college in Baltimore. You know, nothing says that you have to have a bachelor's degree, a doctorate degree, or anything like that to be you know, anybody in the civil service, whether it's a city councilman, a mayor, county commission, a delegate, a House of Representative, or their senator or president. It's age, you know, those are the requirements that you have to meet. You know, so I mean, you know, I'm not able to answer, you know, I hope I, you know, addressed the question. Yeah.
All right, we're going to do one more question, and then we're going to bring the meeting to a close. The question is, if we have a right to freedom of speech and should not be censored, if it does not cause harm to others, what is your view of teachers' ability to teach or speak to some of the history of our nation that takes into account our history of system-wide discrimination against certain groups of persons and cultures?
Oh, what an awesome trick question. You know, so, you know, the author of this is great. You know, I am a huge history buff. My girls, I mean, my girls come home, you know, they're 10th grade at Washington High School, and they come home with a history project, and I start like salivating. Okay, can I help? I want to help. You know, I'm a huge history buff. Teach history. No one's saying you can't teach history, but the one thing that is, there is no one that in this world that should tell anyone that's listening that you are inferior of someone else because of your skin color, your religious, your hair color, your height, your weight, your body stance, and so, but by all means, as a teacher, teach history, teach it all, talk about it. We know that, the slavery process of the United States was an ugly time. We understand that, the civil rights movement, was not only a great thing for the country, but it was also a horrific time for those that were on the opposite side, in regards to their fight. Teach it. No one's saying you can't teach it. Teach it. But again, don't tell someone else that they're inherently inferior because of something that possesses them.
Thank you very much. Would you like to do a closing statement before we bring our meeting to an end?
Sure. I mean, I think I've made every single one of your kickoff meetings and your end meetings, since I've been running. I always like to hear what people are thinking or what people are looking for, seeing, and a lot of times, all of this stuff is learning processes for everybody, and sometimes, we don't know that a certain bill would be coming forward. I mean, as an example, the first question was about the the fraud and of our election cycle, and the scrutiny on our election cycle. We didn't know that, I don't know of a bill coming through, so it gives us an opportunity to learn. But I take the folks that you have that are on your system in the League of Women Voters. The questions are always very, very good and detailed. I look forward to a fun, successful session. And I say fun because I am a workaholic and I love to work. And when I get down there, I just start running and just going and just getting stuff done. So for me, that's fun. It's aggravating at the golf course when I'm sitting here and it's winter time and there's nothing going on and nobody's coming in to play golf. And, my staff is like, wait, relax. And I say, no, I can't. I got to do stuff. So getting down to Charleston is a great thing. It's hard on my family. I love my family. God bless my family for everything they do and put up with, me leaving them. But, it's just, I'm excited for my next session. So thank you all.
In case you don't see the chat, I would like to let you know that Dixie is thanking you, Delegate Clark, for your answers and giving us your thoughts on all of our questions. And thank you for your support. And I would like to thank you because, just as you mentioned, you have attended all of our forums, which is greatly appreciated, to dedicate your time to the constituents of Jefferson County. And I'd like to thank you very much for that. And also, since even though Delegate Espinosa had to leave, we're thanking him for his time as well.
I'll pass that along.
And I do thank everybody else that has attended our forum once again tonight. And with that, I close this meeting and thank everyone and bless everybody.
All right, Happy New Year all.
Happy